So we're going to go through most of Act 5 here. I'm going to get you up to the end scene. So I told you guys a good idea was to go watch this first scene in the movie version. Any movie version would work. Because it's a little strange to have these moments with the two clowns. So in a Shakespearean comedy, the archetype of the clown is always sort of the witty fool. So everyone thinks he's an idiot, but he speaks these sort of universal truths through his idiocy. So the clowns come in because we've gotten very dark. So we have this moment of lightness before we head into the final scene. And they are basically arguing. They're grave diggers. So they're arguing over whether or not this girl, Ophelia, meant to kill herself or not. And they have this discussion of whether an act, once committed, is still an act. So there's this very existential discussion about life and death and whether or not a person is still a person after death. And that's what they're kind of going back and forth on when Hamlet comes in. And Hamlet says, he says around line 66, he says, has this fellow no feeling of his businesses as sings in the grave making? So why is he singing while he's digging some poor person's grave? And Horatius says, custom hath made it in him a property of easiness. So basically, when you do something enough, you kind of lose sensitivity to it. Which is a very interesting comment on the nature of death here. So Hamlet and him, they have a sort of back and forth, and the guy throws the skull up, and he says, Hamlet's saying, why don't you care about who these people are? And he's saying, do you know who this guy is? He's been here 23 years. Do you know who this guy is? So he takes this skull up, and he says, I know. Finally, the clown says, I know who that is. He says, that was Yorick. He was the king's jester. And Hamlet has this moment where everything's very, very real for him. He says, alas, poor Rorik, I knew him well. So he said, I have all these fond memories of playing with him and running around on his back. And, this was a real person here. So we have this discussion of death and life and how one sort of remains or doesn't remain after death, which is interesting in light of the ghosts that we've seen throughout the play. So they realize that there's a ceremony going on, so they go to hide themselves. And the ceremony, of course, is for Ophelia, because Hamlet doesn't know that Ophelia is dead at this point. And Laertes and the priest are talking, and as they're talking, he looks down and he says something, and Hamlet can see it's Ophelia, and he says, what, the fair Ophelia? On the bottom of 1182. So his mother is there, and she's scattering the flowers, and she's sweet to the sweet, and Laertes is so overcome with emotion that he jumps into the grave and takes her up into his arms. And Hamlet has a fit. He comes out and he says, what is he whose grief bears such an emphasis? And he goes and says, who could have more grief than I? He says, this is I, Hamlet the Dane. And Laertes knows that Hamlet has killed his father, so they have a fight, and he says, I'll pluck out your eyes, and basically he says that, we're going to have a duel. And Hamlet says, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not, with all their quantity of love, make up my sum. What wilt thou do for her? So basically, I'm willing to fight for Ophelia in her honor, in her death. What are you going to do for her? And he's comparing their loves for her, which is really kind of interesting. So everyone else sees him as mad, and Laertes says, fine, I'm gonna duel with you. And it all kind of fits well into the plan that they already had in place, the king and him. So we go and we leave, and the queen says at the end, she says, this is mere madness, and thus a while the fit will work on him. So basically, wanting to duel this guy is just another fit of madness. So Hamlet and Horatio, they're walking aside, and Hamlet sort of reveals something to him. He says, so Horatio, what I told you as far as the pirates really wasn't true. He says, I was on my way to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and I looked into the bag, and I saw the letters, and I read them, and I saw that I was supposed to be put to death. And he implies that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern kind of knew about this, so they really weren't his friends. So he says, what I did was I just changed the name on there. So I changed it to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And he says, and luckily, the next day, the pirates came. And I just went off with the pirates. And that's how I got back. So he's left Rosencrantz and Guildenstern on the ship to England with letters which basically mean their death. And Horatio says, don't you feel bad about this? And he says, no. This is all part of the king who hath killed my king and whored my mother, popped in between the election and my hopes, thrown out his angle from my proper life. Is it not perfect conscience to quit him with this arm? So is it not right that I should cut off the sort of the tools that he's using to try and kill everybody else or try and get rid of everybody else? So he doesn't see them he says, is it really further evil? No. So he doesn't see their deaths as anything but sort of the cost of war here between two great figures. So this is where the discussion of madness gets really interesting, because he killed Polonius and had no emotion. He's killed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and had no emotion. And he sort of elevated this conflict between him and Claudius to epic proportions. So this is where a lot of people tend to think, yes, he is going crazy. And then on the other hand, you could say that maybe he's not. Maybe he does see these figures as just, arms, as he says, arms of his uncle, and he has every right to cut them off. So he says, I am sorry, however, that I did forget myself to Laertes. So I am sorry that I lost it around Laertes, because he really does nothing to me, and I did kill his dad. So I will go apologize to him. So then this guy comes in, Osric. And if you see on the picture here, there's a version here with Rob Williams as Osric. He comes in and he says, my lord, basically, this long discussion, my lord, your uncle has made a bet on this, a big bet on this little duel between you guys. And I should say, this is not a duel. This is supposed to be with, like a fencing match, like foils. And he says the only caveat is he wants to do it right now. And Hamlet is a little trusting, and he says, yeah, sure, that's fine. So he goes in thinking they're just going to have a friendly little fight. So when they get in there, he takes Laertes aside, and he tells him that he's sorry that he lost his temper, and that he gives him his hand, and they shake on it, kind of. And he says, you were just on the bottom of 1189. He says, Laertes is just... what does it then? Hamlet says, what does it then? His madness, Hamlet's madness. If it be so, Hamlet is the faction that is wrong. His madness is poor Hamlet's enemy. So basically, you're a victim of my madness. I'm so sorry, man. And Laertes says, I am satisfied in nature. I appreciate your apology. So let's just have a friendly little fight. So it seems like they're we know the plan that's in place, so we have this question of, is he really going to enact this or not? And I just realized as I'm talking, I led you guys into the final scene. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep talking about it and do one video, and then that way you can go and watch the scene after and really understand what's going on. So as they're picking out the foils, Hamlet doesn't really care. He's just asks, that's the longest one. Okay, I'll take that one. But Laertes is looking at the foils, and he's saying, no, that one's too heavy. Let me see another. No, let me see that one. So you understand as the audience that he has in fact decided to go ahead and go through with it for whatever reason. He still wants to kill Hamlet. So he's chosen the specifically pointed foil and the one that has the poison on it. So the fight begins, and they kind of volley back and forth, and Hamlet gets a hit, Hamlet gets a little hit, but it's supposed to be with sort of the padding on, so it's just a little hit like that. And then the king says, well done, Hamlet, here, take my drink. And he says, I give you a pearl, and he puts the pearl into the drink, which is probably wine. And he puts the pearl in the drink, says, here, take it. So we know as the audience that that's the poison. So he drinks the cup, and then he puts the pearl in there to try and prove that there's nothing wrong with it. But Hamlet says, nay, I'll play this bout first, set it a while. So you wonder if on some level Hamlet the way this is played can either be Hamlet does know that he's trying to kill him, or Hamlet doesn't know and he's too wrapped up in having this fight with Laertes. So the queen at this point, she takes the cup and she says, The queen carouses to thy fortune, Hamlet, and she starts to go to drink it, and the king says, Gertrude, do not drink. And if you look at the movie version I gave you guys, you see the queen knows what's in it. That she's realized what the king has done, and she's so overwrought with guilt and grief, she sees this as her way out. And so she says, no, I will drink, and she drinks it. Other versions of this play have her not understanding what she's doing. She's like, no, it's fine, and then drinks. So the king has killed the woman he supposedly killed his own brother for. So it's, different versions take it different ways. And the king says aside, it is the poisoned cup, it is too late. So now the audience knows for sure that it is the poisoned cup. And then Laertes has this moment where he talks with the king aside, and he says, my lord, I will get him now, I'll hit him now. And he says, I do not think it. So he says, I don't think you're really going to do it. And he says, and yet it is almost against my conscience. Why am I going to do this? But he says, nevertheless, I'm going to do it. So they have at it, and he nicks Hamlet. And so Hamlet, they have like a scuffle, and Hamlet takes it, and he nicks Laertes. And he thinks it was just a little, a little foil. He says, and he realizes that he's cut him. And he says, basically he's tipped it. But he doesn't understand that it's been poisoned. So he thinks he's just cheated by making it sharp. And then on the floor, the queen, she rolls over and basically she collapses. And the king, Hamlet says, what's wrong with the queen? And he says, she says, no, the drink, oh my dear Hamlet, the drink, I am poisoned. And she dies. So Hamlet says, oh villainy, let the doors be locked. He knows who's done it. He knows it's his uncle. And just as he's got his uncle at his sword point, Laertes says, Hamlet, thou art slain. No medicine in the world can do thee good. And he tells him what happened. And he says, at the end, he says, I can no more. The king's to blame. So he outs the king. So we have the bodies starting to pile up like any Shakespearean tragedy at the end. Hamlet grabs it and he stabs the king with the poisoned sword. So he stabs him, which is one way of killing him. He has the poisoned sword, which is the second way. So he's just kind of adding insult to injury and trying to really make the king die a very painful death. And he says, then venom to thy work. And he stabs him. And everyone's kind of going crazy. And he says, here, thou incestuous, murderous, damned Dane, drink off the potion. Is thy union here? Follow my mother. So basically, you wanted to be with her, you're going to be with her. And he forces the wine or whatever it is, poison, down his throat. And Laertes, the king dies, and he says, he is justly served. And he says, I am sorry, Hamlet. Exchange forgiveness with me. So they end up in sort of a peace. And then Laertes dies. So now we have the mother, the king, and Laertes all dead on the floor. And Hamlet has his last sort of lines of the play, and he says, Horatio, the one person he could trust in all this, Horatio, hold me, basically, I am dead. And he says, report me and my cause a right to the unsatisfied. So tell my tale, tell everyone that I made it right. And Horatio says, no, I can't let you do that, I can't leave you. And he tries to grab the cup and drink it, because he's so loyal to Hamlet. Hamlet says, give me the cup, absolutely not, and he throws it away. And then he says, tell my story. And they hear this volley, so the sound of marching and drums and everything. And he says, what is it? And he says, young Fortinbras is coming with conquest from Poland. So he's conquered Poland. He's coming here. And Hamlet says, I'm going to die, but I give my dying voice to Fortinbras. I think he should be king. So there's no more discussion of who's going to be, there's no more fighting after he's dead, in other words. And he says, the rest is silence. And then he dies. So Horatio says, now cracks a noble heart, good night, sweet prince, which is a beautiful line. And Fortinbras comes in and he sees all of the bodies on the floor. He says, what horribleness has happened here. And they tell the tale, and the first ambassador says, also Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. And he says, who should we thank? Who should we blame for that? And Horatius says, do not thank him. He never gave the commandment for their death. So, I'm sorry, my computer went out again. So he says it's not him. He didn't do it. So he wants Hamlet's memory to be preserved as something pure. So Fortinbras says, I think I have some right to this kingdom. I will lay my claim to it if you want me to. And Horatius says, yes, of all that have cause to speak, I think you are the best choice. So he says, all right, I will take the royalty and I'll take the kingdom, with a heavy heart. And he tells them to bear Hamlet up onto the platform so that everyone can see this royal, noble man. So that's the end of Act 5. So hopefully you enjoyed Hamlet. I know it can be a little bit dense, a little bit confusing, but there's so much here that is so good, and I'm going to let you guys continue on with your final quiz here. And then after that, I have some sort of brainstormings and that sort of things for you guys to get started on. And then next week, you're going to move into writing your paper. So if you want to go ahead and start writing it, that's great. I have a couple things next week to kind of help you finish up. And that's going to be your last paper. So good luck.